her platform is that Richter's no good because his father bought a company that Joe Biden probably was running, and then
Alluded.
right, and then they did infrastructure projects
We good?
in Libya, and they support.
Will everyone please come to order and stand up for the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we move further, since we're honoring social distancing, if anybody feels uncomfortable with the masks on, just put them down. I don't think we're going to get many more people coming in, but we've got the chairs set up with plenty of room, and I think we can do it, right? Okay, could we have the reading of the Sunshine Law, please?
Notice of this meeting was published in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Okay, in our normal announcement, there will be no new business after 11 p.m. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. McLaughlin.
Here.
McLaughlin, sorry. Ms. Snyder, absent. Mrs. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. McKay.
Here.
Mr. Wagner, absent. Mrs. Baggio.
Here.
Mrs. Tyndall.
Here.
Ms. Costco.
Here.
Mr. Levinson. Him on there?
Are you supposed to call in?
Well, we're checking to see if he's
Okay.
online. He's supposed to.
Mr. Levinson, are you online? Mr. Frank, can you hear me?
Yes, Paul, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to speak.
Okay, okay. So absent, Mr. Silk,
Here.
Mr. Tricocci,
Here.
and Mr. Krollpfeifer.
Here. Okay, sorry. We have a quorum, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Quiet. Good, how are you?
Okay, items for new business. We have one item, which is the preliminary investigation from non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment or rehabilitation, and our planner, Mr. Scott Taylor, will be making a presentation on that.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, members of the public. What you have before you this evening is an investigation to determine whether certain areas within the municipality qualify under the local redevelopment and housing law to be either a non-condemnation redevelopment area or the alternative rehabilitation area. The governing body on November 12, 2019 adopted resolution 2019-161-11, where they identified 17 different parcels by block and lot and requested that the board undertake an investigation under the local redevelopment and housing law, very specifically identify whether any or all of these parcels meet the statutory criteria to be considered an area in need of redevelopment without condemnation or an area in need of rehabilitation. By way of background, the step that was not taken was, so under these two categories, the municipality cannot exercise any of its authority or eminent domain to condemn property. That was very specific in their resolution and in the notice. So that is excluded and not part of this project. So any inclusion or any modifications to any of these properties would be completely voluntary on the part of any of the property owners. I'll also add that these are properties that were the subject of a preliminary investigation and a redevelopment plan that were prepared in 2004 and then amended in 2007. As we started to look at that property again and potential uses on that site, the township solicitor and I looked at the age of the report, and there have been several modifications to the statute, the local housing and redevelopment law, and more particular to the noticing requirements to specifically distinguish between designating an area as a non-condemnation redevelopment area and a condemnation redevelopment area, which we are not seeking this evening. And that's why the study map that was identified and then put up here at Town Hall, and the report in every location identifies that this analysis is only for rehabilitation designation or non-condemnation redevelopment area designation. Are there any questions on that before I go any further from the board? Because I want to try to go through this methodically. If you have any questions on any particular sections, I can answer them. And I know some of the board members have heard this, but for the benefit of the public, and newer board members will go through and reiterate. So this is the first step in what is a multi-step process for any redevelopment process. This first step is the governing body asks the planning board to undertake a study and have a public hearing to say, does this qualify to be either an area needed redevelopment without condemnation or as a rehabilitation area? If the board makes that determination, either or both this evening, the area can then be designated by the governing body as either a redevelopment or a rehabilitation area. That doesn't really change any rights or anything as it relates to the property. The next step, as set forth under the local redevelopment and housing law, is the preparation of a redevelopment plan. That redevelopment plan is what becomes the guiding plan for the actual redevelopment or reuse of that property. You may remember when we did the Lawrence Boulevard redevelopment plan, that modifies the uses that may be permitted, the bulk standards, and may enforce special design standards if desired. So this is that first step of the investigation. The next step would be a redevelopment plan. The process for that is it gets introduced like any other ordinance by the governing body. It then gets referred to the Joint Land Use Board for master plan consistency and recommendations before it goes back for a second reading and public hearing on that redevelopment plan. That's sort of the second main step. Any of those changes that a potential redevelopment plan could include, any developer who wants to implement anything anywhere in that study area still has to come back to the planning board for normal subdivision and or site plan approval in the regular course of events as set forth by your local ordinance and the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law. So we're redoing steps that were done back in 2004 and amended in 2007. And we're now basically trying to get some of the administrative I's dotted and T's crossed because of some of the changes in the legislation in the past 16 years. So that's where we are today. So the governing body did their resolution. We prepared a study. The local redevelopment and housing law has very specific statutory criteria for redevelopment area designation and rehabilitation area. As many of you know, the subject study area is generally bounded by Route 38, Gloucestertown Road, and Amesport Mount Laurel Road. There are, I think I indicated, 17 separate parcels, a total of approximately 42 acres. A majority, as set forth on the zoning map, majority of the parcels along the Route 38 frontage are mostly in the highway commercial zoning district. The balance of those properties are located in the R1 residential zoning district. We've gone through, we've analyzed those existing areas, the existing uses and land use, and then we've actually gone through and done an analysis both under the rehabilitation area designation and also for redevelopment. I've jumped forward a bit and sort of summarized that. Under the rehabilitation area designation, the statute has 6 different criteria that can be met so the area can be considered a rehabilitation area. One of those is that more than half of the housing stock in the area is at least 50 years old. we provided a chart on page 14 of our report that does identify that of the 6 existing homes, 5 of those homes are at least 50 years in age. So that represents over 83% of the housing stock within that overall study area. That automatically qualifies the overall study area to be considered, excuse me, an area in need of rehabilitation.
Can I just stop you on that point? That seems to imply that if the house is more than 50 years old, it's in need of rehabilitation. Because just of age? Is there no consideration given to the actual condition of the house?
So the way that the legislature set the statute up, they very specifically had that criteria, which is shown on page 14 of your report. It specifically says that one of those criteria is that more than half the housing stock in the delineated area is at least 50 years old. It doesn't specifically say, and each individual home is in need or is obsolete or has living conditions that would be unwholesome. That's a step that we have to take for the higher bar to establish a redevelopment area. So the rehabilitation area is actually a very low bar. The statute actually allows the municipality to declare the entire municipality as an area in need of rehabilitation. The borough of Summers Point, the city of Summers Point, has actually done that. They've designated the entire city as a rehabilitation area. In and of itself, that does not mean that every home within there, within that study area or designated area, requires rehabilitation or has conditions to be unwholesome or blighted, etc., which are the standard bar and statutory criteria for redevelopment designation. So that's why we sort of went through that very specifically to evaluate sort of the overall parcel first, and then we'll go through and we'll touch on our redevelopment parcel analysis, and we'll touch on those lot by lot, and then you'll see at the end of the report, as well as board number 2, the Joint Land Use Board and the governing body have a few options with how they want to approach the designations of these properties. So the one thing I will add, so based on our analysis, it does meet criteria B for the, or criteria 2 for the entire study area, because 83% of the housing stock is greater than 50 years old.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Of the remaining 5, and my question only pertains to the, on this map over here, that you've got the pink area
Correct.
and the green one down at the bottom, the 4 acres or something down there. Just to try to help us in making a decision regarding this whole thing. It's one thing, it says a portion of the structures are deteriorated or in substandard condition. From my opinion, none of them are. Is that correct? Okay, so that one doesn't. The housing one, I understand. Vacancy, abandonment, or underutilization does not apply for those 7 properties, right? Property tax in arrears? No. No?
No, not that we're aware of. And
Okay. Environmental contamination?
no, not
No?
that we're aware of.
And water and sewer infrastructure at least 50 years old?
Correct.
So the only area that qualifies is the housing at least 50 years old.
Right. And the statute is clear that as long as that study area meets one of those statutory
Right.
criteria.
Okay.
designated a rehabilitation area. So frankly, what we did, Mr. Chairman, was once we knew that it clearly met the housing, we didn't do a thorough investigation or analysis with respect to the age and condition of the utilities.
Okay.
Because that became unnecessary at that point because we met that bar for the rehabilitation area designation.
Okay.
And I'm sort of echoing down the same path. I think Tom, Tish and I were involved when we set this up originally back in need of redevelopment. But I'm wondering what the end game is for, that lot, the block of residential houses.
So,
What the end game is, why would we necessarily include them in this plan?
Understood. And I will get to that. I'm going to go through the parcel analysis, and then what we'll do is we'll get to the redevelopment map, which is map number 2, and that's where we sort of summarize what our findings were, and we frankly give the board and the municipality 3 options with how to treat those lots shown in pink in particular moving forward.
Okay.
So as we've gone through, and I think a lot of the board members are familiar with the prior Route 38 Southwest redevelopment area. It was adopted in 2004, amended in 2007. We relied on some of that information that remains current because a lot of those parcels have not changed in the period of time between then and between now. So as we went through that analysis, what we found was that there are a number of parcels, and Mr. Mayor, I can actually sort of jump through it and touch on the recommendations map. When you look at map number 2, which is actually a copy of the exhibit on page 32 of the report, you can see that based on our individual parcel analysis, that the Long Bridge Farms properties A, B, C, I, and H, which are known as the Muschleichel properties. They were part of and associated with the Volkswagen dealership. Those properties have been vacant in excess of 2 years and 10 years, and therefore meet statutory criteria as well as underutilization. Properties O and P, which are the 2 smaller yellow lots running along Hainesport Mount Laurel Road, also qualify in and of themselves as redevelopment areas.
That, for purposes of folks in the audience, if you're looking at it, it's the yellow on that map.
Yes, so that is just those yellow parcels.
Okay.
And by the way, Scott, this presentation is really nice. You did a great job here.
Yeah, you did.
It's one of the nicest presentations I've ever seen.
I echo that.
Looks
I
good.
really echo that.
Thank you.
I-
So we know it's complex, so that's one of the reasons that some good graphics try to help tell
Yeah,
the
it's
story
nice.
for the board members
Yes.
and the public as well. So as we went through that analysis, those parcels, A, B, C, D, H, I, O, and P, that are shown in yellow, do meet the statutory criteria. We have a description of those parcels, the size of the parcels, and we've identified which of those statutory criteria we believe they meet to be considered a redevelopment area without condemnation. Under the definition of a redevelopment area, I'll paraphrase from the statute, a municipality may include parcels which in and of themselves may not meet the statutory criteria, but they are found necessary for the effective overall redevelopment of the area. A lot of planners and attorneys call this the hole in the donut theory, that if you have parcels that are surrounded predominantly by properties that do qualify, you can include those additional parcels. Those are the parcels that we are showing in green. Those are parcels Q and parcel J.
Those are the green ones.
Those are green. So if you look at that recommendations map that's in your report, and I apologize, the handout that I did tonight in working remotely with my staff, they cut off in the 11 by 17 that you have, the last option is actually cropped off. So if you, do all you have your copy of the actual report? So if not, I will, I'll add that last sentence. So what our recommendations are is that the yellow properties do in fact meet the statutory criteria for redevelopment designation. The green parcels do not particularly meet any of those specific criteria, but each one of those is owned in common ownership with an adjacent parcel. Under some land use case law, those properties could be considered merged and could be considered as one. And we think for the overall effective redevelopment of the area, which has been set forth in your master plans for the last several decades, to try to capitalize on the Route 38 frontage, to try to get good economic development along those corridors, and try to preserve some of the less developed and more rural areas of the community. So that's why we're trying to do all of this, to be consistent with what your planning goals and objectives have been as a municipality and as a board over the last couple of decades, and do this in a way that stimulates some growth along that corridor. So it's our opinion, and if the board concurs, that the two green parcels, because of the key location of parcel J directly at the intersection and being completely surrounded by qualifying parcels that are in common ownership by the same entity, that parcel should be included. In terms of parcel Q, which is approximately 4.05 acres, that is also in common ownership with parcel A, owned by the same entity. So we think that, just from a land use standpoint, the aggregation of those parcels allow for more comprehensive development when and if the township committee determines to move forward with a potential redevelopment plan. It allows flexibility in the creation of that redevelopment plan.
Two questions. You say common ownership between A and Q, but that's not what your chart says. The chart says A is Friendship Farms entity, I assume a partnership or an LLC, and Q is Eric Revicchio.
Correct. So Eric Revicchio is a principal in the other entity, so there is a common ownership between there, and part of the request that brought this forward was actually a request of Mr. Revicchio to revisit and to look at this area for potential redevelopment as we move forward.
All right, second question. Do you see a distinction between J and Q based upon the surrounding properties, particularly the surrounding properties to Q? All residential, both across the street and on the back sides, making Q a little different, maybe quite a bit different than J for purposes of zoning.
It does. And I don't know if perhaps the letter from the applicant's attorney, one of the things that had been identified that in some of the discussions we've had with the property owner, one of the difficulties is trying to get county road access out onto Hainesport Mount Laurel Road because of the very short distance between the intersection and the other qualifying redevelopment areas. It's possible that nothing could be able to have access in or out of Hainesport Mount Laurel Road. One of the things that parcel Q affords is the potential flexibility that if the township committee was in agreement with a proposal, that there could be access to whatever that future development could be.
I have two questions for you. It's follow-up for what Mr. McKay is talking about. But in the introduction here, in your booklet, you mentioned that this redevelopment was part of to enhance the benefit of tax ratables. So my specific question, it would be, let's just assume we did all this with everything. What's the difference between the tax rate on highway commercial and residential? And for purposes of my question, I'm going to include Q in residential because it is a residence.
Correct.
So that's going to be changed, so to speak. So my question is, where do...
Not necessarily. Any modifications to zoning, any changes at all, are not the subject of a preliminary investigation or a determination study. Those would only be the subject of a redevelopment plan. The governing body moving forward with this map, with an overall area, can say, we think only the first 200 feet along Route 38 should be zoned commercial, and the rest should all be single family or farm or the whole thing. So we're not at that step yet, and that's why I tried to talk about how the local redevelopment and housing law sets up these steps. The first step is, here's 42 acres. Does this qualify as rehabilitation and or redevelopment area? Designating that as such, and then the project can sit and nothing happen forever, which is frankly what has happened over the last 16 years. This was designated, redevelopment plan was created, and nothing moved forward. So making that distinction, and we're saying that from redevelopment allows a town to create flexible zoning and design standards to try to attract development that may not otherwise be facilitated under your standard C1 zoning or HC zoning. That's the same issue that we ran into with the Hainesport Commerce Center as part of the Lawrence Boulevard redevelopment plan. Our ordinances and our zoning that was in place would not have facilitated that project otherwise. But the governing body and the board recognized the importance of trying to implement that revitalization of the corridor. So a plan was developed and approved to effectuate that. We're sort of in the first step of that process now. That second step that could happen in a month, 3 months, or a year from now would be the creation of a redevelopment plan. Normally the way that happens is a concept plan or multiple concept plans are presented to the municipality with recommendations for zoning or bulk standard changes, and then the governing body determines whether or not they are consistent with the economic goals for growth along the corridor, whether it's appropriate based on the surrounding neighborhood, and then the governing body develops what those actual standards will be. That does get referred, as I mentioned before, that does get referred back to the Joint Land Use Board for master plan consistency, but we're not at that rezoning stage yet. This is simply the designation qualification.
Okay, thank you. My second question has to do with one of your last comments about common ownership and having access to Hainesport Mount Laurel Road. I know you weren't, Mr. Taylor, you weren't involved with the township many years ago, but Mrs. Kelly, Mr. McKay, Mr. McLaughlin, and I were on the Joint Land Use Board, and Mr. Kingsbury was also our solicitor at that time. There was a concept coming in for a water park on this main property, A, and one of the things they were looking for was access to Hainesport Mount Laurel Road, Fostertown Road, as well as Route 38. But the county took a big exception to it, as well as the residential neighbors in the area, and it wasn't permitted. So my question is, why would we now rethink about this and give this property development that we have no idea what it is, access to Hainesport Mount Laurel Road and or Fostertown Road? And one thing with the Fostertown, on the yellow map, that you have over there, there is access to Fostertown Road right there in the corner. It's right at that right turn lane. But the county wasn't too happy with that. And I don't think they're going to look any different at it. I think it was about 15 years ago that application came in, and it was declined. So, and now we're dealing with something where we don't know what's going to come in. And yet we're looking at, I'm addressing specifically property Q. Change that from a strictly residential to, and the fact that it doesn't meet the requirements, why should we think about helping it make the requirements? Only because of common ownership.
So what might go there, as I mentioned before, is not the subject of this study. That would be the subject of a redevelopment plan. That redevelopment plan is completely at the discretion of the governing body. And while I don't want to speak for the governing body, I would suspect that if a developer came in with a proposal for a water park, that would not be looked upon very fondly, and that a redevelopment plan would likely not be developed for the site. And the governing body has complete authority and jurisdiction and discretion to create a plan for what they feel is appropriate for the area. Not necessarily what the developer thinks they need to have there, but what they think strikes a good balance of preserving and enhancing the character and the economic viability of the corridor. So that really becomes a completely discretionary item when the redevelopment plan is considered by the governing body, which will then again be referred back to the joint planning board.
Yeah, on the same
Thank you.
subject of access,
No, I was just going to say thank you.
on the same subject of access, it looks as if lots I and C provide access to Hainesport Mount Laurel Road from lots B and H. Am I reading that correctly?
So those parcels appear to be, based on review of the tax maps, a former right-of-way that has been vacated. So parcels G and L have actually reverted to the residential single-family homes on either side. So what may have been, what appears to have been a former right-of-way through that area has since been vacated, and there is no potential for access in that location.
All right, and then it seems to me that I recall that there is an easement. I'll call it an easement. It might actually be a fee simple lot that allowed access from Hainesport Mount Laurel Road to the Volkswagen dealer building. You all remember that?
Yep,
Yeah.
I think that's what would be
So that's-
letter P,
I believe that's
and
one.
it has a sign in there that says road closed.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, and it would be on P, I think. You can still see the trace of the gravel road. And it seemed to me that it was an easement, but your map doesn't really mention
So
it.
that's actually parcel O.
Oh,
So if you look at page 26 in the report,
yeah,
you
you
can actually
can,
identify.
picture of the sign.
Yeah, there's a picture of the sign there that says road closed. There was no easement, while we did do a title search, there was no easement shown on the tax maps for access. So we're not sure about the disposition of that. Additionally, the other issue is with parcel Q, it does afford an alignment and a traditional intersection with east, I believe it's Easton Way, that is directly opposite of that parcel.
Of O?
No.
Q. Q is Easton Way, yes.
And as the board well knows, both the county and every engineer, the ideal way to handle any kind of an intersection is to have them line up, because when you have offset left turn movements, you're looking left and right, but you're not looking at the person who's coming out down 100 feet in either direction. That's when a lot of those accidents happen, with those short offsets.
That lineup well, any access onto Hainesport Mount Laurel Road through Q, but particularly one that lines up that way, raises the issue of traffic flow on Easton, which has been historically a problem. Speed bumps, stop signs, and still people race down that road. And so that kind of an intersection will raise cries of more traffic problems on Easton, I suspect.
In discussions with the attorney and the landowner, any connection out to Hainesport Mount Laurel Road would only be to serve the back half of the property, and it would not become a through road to connect out to Road A and out to Route 38 so as to create a cut. So that was sort of the intent. Again, that's really the second stage of this multi-stage process. We're getting ahead of the game a bit. But again, the governing body would have complete authority and discretion to create whatever limitations on whatever that zoning may or may not be, as well as access limitations.
In full disclosure, I've seen some sort of a plan for there, kind of cross in front of me for development, and I'm kind of getting the feeling that I'm being asked to agree to something before I really know what it is. And I'm just wondering what, kind of why we're here. I mean, I guess we got to follow a set of steps, Scott, but we really don't know what the applicant wants to do here. So we're talking about traffic, we're talking about all kinds of things that are going to be important at some point. And I just wonder if we make a decision, are we going to be able to have any recourse on any of this stuff?
So your recourse as mayor and as a member of the governing body is that if a concept plan comes before you, that there is not a decision that the governing body is comfortable with, the redevelopment plan does not get developed or implemented. The zoning stays in place exactly as it exists today. All this step does is draw a line to say, we think that this area could help us meet some of our economic and redevelopment goals that we've talked about, and we think we'd like to give the governing body the discretion to work toward redevelopment that is the best or balanced for the community. And that's what we did with Lawrence Boulevard and the Hainesport Commerce Center. When we started doing that plan, we drew the line, we identified the parcels. We really only had a rough concept plan for the Hainesport Commerce Center, but we also took another look at the Trap Rock properties, Trap Rock State Seal, Paul's Tank Farm, and the Verizon property. So there were no plans, but we designated them and said, this might make sense for the greater good at some point to develop a plan for this. When the redevelopment plan portion came about for Lawrence Boulevard, we actually only developed a plan for the Stevens parcels to facilitate Hainesport Commerce Center. Those other 4 properties were not included in the redevelopment plan because there was no concept plan for those that the governing body was comfortable with. So that's really all this is now, is saying, does this meet the criteria? Is this something that we should consider the redevelopment process to give the governing body the flexibility to come up with standards based on a concept plan or not? We have worked on redevelopment plans where there were no proposals by any redevelopers, and the town said, we want to do this as redevelopment, zone it mixed use, we want to get some commercial, we want to get some retail, and they set forth the zoning.
So it almost sounds like the planning board has tonight to, in a sense, and I'm sure, we're not out to hurt any developer. We want good development. I'm sure all of us do. But if the planning board agrees to this, then the committee can get it, rezone it, and the planning board's kind of out of the rezoning issue at that point. No?
So
So now we just tell you the plan, well, we rezoned this, that, and that, this, and here's what you have.
So the legislature, when they developed the local redevelopment and housing law, they sort of mirrored the municipal land use law, where it separates the powers between the governing body and the planning board to create some balance there. As all of you know, the planning board is charged with creating and adopting the master plan. The governing body has the authority, and solely the governing body has the authority to draft ordinances to effectuate that master plan, to rezone properties. So that jurisdiction and that authority is actually taken away from the joint land use board, and that's part of the balance that the legislature set up in the municipal land use law. When the governing body adopts any land use ordinance, either under traditional zoning or under redevelopment, it still has to be referred to the joint land use board for master plan consistency and recommendations. If the joint land use board determines that a specific plan or zoning modification is inconsistent, then that recommendation goes back to the governing body. And I believe that actually changes, the governing body has to set forth the reasons of why they're developing that, and I'm not sure if it changes the vote at the governing body level.
It does,
But I believe it requires a supermajority at that point.
yes. In other words, the governing body can overrule the recommendations of the planning board. The planning board says this is not consistent with the master plan. Governing body still can overrule that, but there are certain ways they have to do it.
So there is recourse if this moves forward.
Yeah.
And that biggest recourse is the governing body has complete discretion and authority to effectuate any redevelopment plan that they choose, whether it reflects a proposal from a developer or not, or they have the discretion to not adopt a redevelopment plan and to allow the underlying zoning to completely remain intact.
Scott?
This is no disrespect to anybody in the room, okay, but I'm still smarting from that warehouse out on 38, the Stevens property that you made reference to. I mean, that thing came through so fast, I still can't believe it. And I remember specifically asking the applicant, who's going to be the tenant here? And they had no idea. I mean, and I even said to the attorney, no disrespect, counselor, but I said, I can't believe putting up a 400,000 square foot warehouse, not having an idea who's going to move into it. And I'm wondering if, are we caught up in something else again here? About like a week from now, we're going to get another application because something's already planned here? And the reason I'm asking it is I'm concerned about the 8 properties, which would be on Fostertown Road, the white over here on your map, right there. And they're all residential properties, they're all R1. The pink ones on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road are all R1. There's families living in all of those homes. The Q property is residential, families living in there. And immediately across Hainesport Mount Laurel Road, that entire strip is all residential and goes down to residential properties. And I hate to see us get rushed into something that's going to bring highway commercial much, much closer to a bunch of residential people on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road and Fostertown Road.
So that's not the case. There is no zoning proposed under this plan. There was the intention based on the concept plan that I had seen does not bring commercial any closer to Hainesport Mount Laurel Road. In fact, it actually pushed residential a little bit closer to Route 38 than the existing zoning does today.
But,
So-
H, let's, you know, and I'm with you, I'm with you. It's kind of like, you have to pass it to find out what's in it. There is a plan, there is an applicant, he's here, and I just think maybe legally, we're not putting the cart before the horse. I respect your, you know, your acumen, and I know Bob is looking over. But in a sense, we kind of are putting the cart before the horse in a moral and ethical way. And again, I personally, and H, I apologize, like you were on the planning board, and Titian, we worked hard over the years and met with many applicants that were trying to buy the Revicchio tract to try to help development. Eric remembers that, and he knows that. So I'm not personally, I just speak for me, but I kind of feel like I'm putting the cart before the horse, a little bit. You know, I'd like to, you know, and I'm sitting on the planning board today, and next week I'll be I'll be on the committee. I'm here now, and I'm talking like a planning board member. And you're right, that warehouse thing was good, it was done well, but it kind of, and I remember you didn't even know anything about it, and you're the chairman of the planning board.
I didn't know anything about
I thought
this
that
either.
was, and you don't know anything about this either, and I kind of think that's, I just don't know if that, you know, I just don't have a good feeling about that, you know, so I don't know, and again, I'm sure it's all being done legal and everything, but we're being asked to make decisions based on a development that is, there's a plan to that development. And I'm sure the applicant will modify the plan along the way, but H, am I right here, and Tom, and the rest of the members, I don't know, am I off base?
No,
No, you're not. I mean,
No.
and
Not as far as I'm concerned, but...
we've raised,
If I'm
as
off,
we've gone
Tom.
along, we've raised a lot of the issues, and there are a lot more that would come up, that you feel as if by voting for the proposal as structured, you're basically giving away any ability to, potentially giving away any ability to really manage the development of this by a proper site plan, because at the end of the day, it could be taken away from you by the governing body.
And I'll be frank.
Am I right? Am I
Yeah.
right or
Sorry.
wrong?
So as of today, pretty much everything that's shown in yellow could be developed as highway commercial, and there is an existing redevelopment plan. in
Sure.
place. This was really a reaffirmation of that because of some changes in the statute. It is the board's prerogative, if they don't feel comfortable with the designation yet, to ask the governing body for some clarification of why are we doing this. To get back to the chairman's point, with the last redevelopment process we went through, I believe that the applicant, that the Lawrence Boulevard redevelopment, there were at least three, if not four, public hearings at the Joint Land Use Board regarding that project. The first was to analyze and investigate the properties. The second one was for referral of the redevelopment plan that had a concept plan in it. And then we had at least one planning board hearing, if not a second planning board hearing. The one thing I would say to the board relative to this application, that last one, or any other, as long as I'm the planner sitting here, if you are not 100% comfortable and all of your questions have not been answered and are not going to be answered before you make a decision, come back next month. Ask me, ask Marty, ask Bob, and say, I still have some questions about this. I'm not comfortable. Don't let yourself feel rushed into any kind of a land use decision. So one thing I will say, after doing this for 30 years, well, that makes me feel old. Land use approvals are forever, good, bad, or indifferent. So that's why, in particular, the redevelopment plan and those site plan approvals are critical. The way land development works, Mr. Chairman, and to get back to your comment, if you take a parcel in another municipality in Mercer County, and it's a large vacant farm, and the town is talking to the landowner or redeveloper, and they're trying to work on a redevelopment plan, 9 times out of 10, they are not under contract yet with who is actually going to build the homes. Or if it's a large warehouse project, end users less frequently build their own buildings. So what happens is a company comes in and they all take baby steps. And when they get closer, then they can actually say, we have a redevelopment designation. They go talk to a few potential end users. We have an approved redevelopment plan. They talk to support and narrow it down to 2 or 3 users. And not until they have to come in for that planning board approval will most of those users actually sign. And a lot of the big national franchises, especially Super Wawas and others, if they want to go onto a site that's going to be redevelopment and the zoning doesn't permit it, a lot of times they won't enter into a contract until the municipality has taken a few steps. So that's how this process works a lot of times in these incremental steps. I would say that if the board's not comfortable or has questions with the proceeding or even a designation that could allow for a redevelopment plan this evening, what we've done in some other communities is there's been a redevelopment subcommittee that could consist of 2 planning board members and 2 governing body members to go through, so there's good communication between both boards, and then that's a conduit for information, and then what could potentially happen at a site can get addressed. But as I said, the safety net that the municipality has, if not the board, is even with this designation, nothing changes on the property. It only allows the governing body to then entertain potential zoning changes.
But again, this is a question. One of the key reasons that I understand that we go through this process of deeming these areas in need of redevelopment is to A, either entice a developer, or B, offer into a pilot program to make the development more attractive to, to either a potential or the developer that's holding the land. And I'm going to mirror Tom's sentiment that are we able to negotiate with if there's a developer, on hand before we go ahead and show our cards, but, insofar as much as what the concept is
In terms of,
and what he wants to do there before we set this thing up for, tax abatements and development and that sort of thing.
so at every step along the way, the governing body, after this designation study, the governing body has complete and utter discretion to offer whatever zoning changes they feel appropriate or none. They also have the authority under the redevelopment plan and the redevelopment agreement to offer tax exemption and abatements that they feel appropriate or none. What we frequently see in a lot of communities is if there's a mixed-use project, the town may consider some tax exemption and abatement or a pilot on the commercial component, but not on the residential.
So educate me, why would we engage in this endeavor of deeming these extra lots? And what is the process? What's the reason that we would necessarily do that?
So that would be a question to ask the governing body from November 12, 2019, when they said we should take a look at this for redevelopment. Globally, so I don't want to speak for the governing body, I can say that generally what happens is what is identical to what we saw on the Lawrence Boulevard redevelopment area. Municipalities in New Jersey are afforded the flexibility of the local redevelopment and housing law. That allows the towns to come up with much more extensive reforestation or architecture requirements or special lighting requirements or increased stormwater management requirements. It also allows them to modify the zoning. They can downzone, they can upzone. So the redevelopment process affords the governing body of the township that flexibility to come up with a unique land use. The
Yeah.
second part, and the most common reason is, to sort of answer your question, I did in the first half, like with Hainesport Commerce Center, by going the route of a redevelopment, I believe that the township has at least entertained a pilot agreement or long-term tax exemption and abatement with that entity to build that warehouse. As a general rule, especially with warehouse and distribution centers, because all of the surrounding municipalities do offer some level of pilot, to be competitive, municipalities then will offer some pilot. This property has stayed vacant for decades.
Oh, yeah.
So the one question that the municipality has, the question that the governing body will need to ask themselves is, the underlying, so when a pilot happens, the assessment on the land and the taxes paid on the land generally stay the same, and the pilot is crafted on the value of the assessed value of the improvements. So if nothing happens out there, your tax stays exactly the same. What Collingswood and a lot of these other areas have done to try to turn things around, they've said, so I rebuilt a building in Mount Laurel, and I put a considerable amount of money into it. And 12 months later, my tax bill doubled. And that hurts. Under rehabilitation, you can offer a 5-year tax exemption and abatement that basically says your base tax stays exactly the same, but instead of hitting you with a 100% increase in year one, we're going to phase that in over 5 years, and it eases the pain. The good thing is it incentivizes the developer or redeveloper to invest in that property. The good thing for the municipality is you can do one of two things. Leave your $6,000 and take your $6,000 and keep that and no one reinvests. Or you can say, we'll give you a tax, basically a phase-in, and at the end of 5 years, the township is now getting $12,000 where they were only getting $6,000 before, and the value of that property has increased, which generally has a positive impact on the property values of all those parcels around it. The rising tide was all ships. So those are the reasons that governing bodies typically consider redevelopment. It's not an investment in next year. It's to take a property that may not be really contributing to the economic redevelopment of that area and to say, we want to have some commercial growth along that corridor. It hasn't happened. We're sort of, Hainesport, as you know, and your master plan has talked about, there's a lot of growth that has happened in the municipalities to the east and the west along the corridor. Hainesport is still a bit of the hole in the donut.
Yep.
If you want to try to incentivize some of those commercial uses, if you're offering some long-term or short-term tax exemption and abatement, is one way to do that. But if that...
Well, H, you probably remember, and Eric, I know you remember, we had, I think, 3 hot application or interested parties down there. One was really good with a plan, and we were going to do whatever we could. I think that guy Chaz came in, again, you know him more than I do, he looked really solid, and we were going to try to help him in any way. And then we had one, which was the water park, that came in really nice, and next thing you know, there's clowns on the street corners, you know, it's just, I guess they were mimicking us, I don't know, but that one kind of went away. So we're not against, you know, at the time, we weren't against helping Eric. The difference today is we're including the green, and I still haven't heard about the pink. That's kind of scary to me, why we would necessarily do that. I mean, if somebody's going to come in and offer those property owners a lot more than their houses are worth and they're willing to sell, I'm sure they would be maybe happy to go, but I don't want to get into that sort of scenario without some sort of a straw poll or something, I don't know.
So, and just to finish out.
So it's a little different this time than it was last time.
Understood. So and to finish out, because we started talking about that, the report identifies that we believe those yellow parcels meet the statutory
Right.
criteria.
Right.
We believe that those green parcels meet the rehabilitation area as the entire area does, and that the governing body has the flexibility that you can either leave them as rehabilitation area only, or you can include them as redevelopment areas. In terms of the pink, it was our opinion that those properties are well maintained. They do not meet the statutory criteria expressly for either rehabilitation area designation or redevelopment designation. But because of the definition of a redevelopment allows the municipality to consider parcels that in and of themselves may not meet the statutory criteria, they can still be considered. So that basically gives the planning board 3 choices for those pink parcels. One is consider them to be a rehabilitation area. The second is consider them to be redevelopment areas as necessary for the overall redevelopment area, or as we say at the bottom of page 32, to leave them undesignated, and they would remain in their existing underlying zone. So that is the one, if you look at your book on page 32, the one line that was cropped off of your 11 by 17 and this board up here is that there's a third bullet under the choices that says that the parcels can be left undesignated, remaining in their underlying zone. So the board has complete authority, and just from looking at those properties, I don't think any of them are necessarily critical of those pink properties in the middle for inclusion as a redevelopment area for the rest to effectively develop. I would say that if I lived in one of those homes, I would actually appreciate having a rehabilitation area designation, because if I decided to improve my home or add on my home, it allows me the flexibility to then ask the governing body to defer my taxes over 5 years. The governing body can decline. I will say that in 2014, we actually did a rehabilitation designation for the entirety of the downtown of Medford. And that was done to try to stimulate the pop shop to come in and build a second store from Collinswood. And that 5-year tax phase-in was sort of the breaking point for them to decide to come in or not. It has also played a role in some businesses saying, hey, if my building is worth $500,000 now and I'm paying $12,000 or $14,000 in taxes, if I put another $500,000 into it, right away I'm paying another $12,000 or $14,000 a year in taxes. Right when I'm done my construction. If I can phase that in over 5 years, that helps my burden a little bit. And again, it helps the municipality, because instead of just having $12,000 forever, 5 years, you get your $28,000 forever. So those are some of those decisions that the governing bodies have the discretion to make or not make when it comes to the tax exemption and abatement under rehabilitation or redevelopment.
I'm sorry, no, who had a question up front here? Was it this? I know they had been
Go ahead.
trying to interject, sorry.
No, I've asked you.
Scott, in approving this today, are we giving up any rights at all?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
So Scott, my question was that you could treat the green properties, both or either one, in particular Q, subject to the same 3 options that you have for the pink properties, correct?
It could.
So those 3 options could easily be put under the green properties as well. You could choose to leave out the pink parcels, the 3rd option. You could choose to take Q and leave it out as well, but leave J, I guess it is, leave J in?
The one reason it's you, and again, in response to, if you look at the environmental mapping on
Page 12.
page 12,
I have an environmental question next, so maybe you'll answer it.
so that's the state's wetland mapping. That little bright green area sort of in the center of the farm, and there's a little wood lot, mature woodland around there. That wetland actually extends further south, and it creates a very awkwardly deep field just to the right of that. For good highway commercial or any commercial development, it's preferable to actually have a shallower lot with greater frontage for good visibility. Having a narrow deep lot is not good for commercial development. So I think that the plan that I had seen actually takes some of that highway commercial zone that is closer to Hainesport Mount Laurel Road and changes that for potential residential land use. So it would actually expand the residential zoning and decrease the amount of highway commercial zoning.
But Scott,
I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Tisha.
Closer to Hainesport Mount Laurel or closer to Fostertown? I'm not following that.
Hainesport Mount Laurel. So
That would be behind the pink
Yeah,
things up there.
right now, there's a little wetland right here,
okay,
and it creates a long, narrow field.
correct.
This back part of that field is of very little value from a commercial standpoint. So the concept was for the residential portion to actually expand slightly into that yellow area. That would actually have potentially less, as this is zoned highway commercial now. If there was residential behind those 5 pink homes, that could actually be less impactful. Again, all of these, until such time that a redevelopment proposal is put before the governing body for them to even discuss a potential redevelopment plan, those things are, the underlying zoning stays in place and the properties remain exactly as they are. So
But Scott,
the board has discretion to not move forward.
yeah, I thought I understood that if we adopted this and we still, you know, that I don't think we're done with the pink yet, we adopt this tonight, then the next step, I think the committee gets together with the applicant or what, because there's definitely a reason that there's going to be rezoning, and that's to build something. So once the planning board does that, it goes to, this is a question, it goes to the committee, and the committee would rezone it.
Correct.
Okay, well, then the planning board has in effect given up some rights, because they're going to be stuck with zoning for something they don't have any idea what the applicant wants to build there. They don't have an idea.
It's no different than your rights currently exist today under the municipal land use law. The governing body could propose and introduce rezoning of any or all of these parcels today under traditional zoning, and the planning board has no power. The legislature has been very clear on that in the redevelopment law and in the municipal land use law.
I understand that.
All this does is create that flexibility. But again, if the board's not comfortable and the governing body is not comfortable at this point, the town may want to hold the designation in abeyance, perhaps convene a redevelopment subcommittee to consider what potential options exist until there's a comfort level.
Well, at least see what the applicant wants to build. No? I mean,
The board of the township have complete discretion and authority to request that. Absolutely. We typically don't see it happen in this space, and we didn't see it at the Pop Shop in Medford. We did the designation of rehabilitation for the whole downtown.
but did the pop shop know they wanted to go there if they got this designation?
They did.
but nobody knew the pop shop wanted to go there, and they didn't build the building, they just took over an old bank.
Yes.
So it's not, it's a little different than this.
Well, but the amount of money that they invested, it may have cost them more than building a new building.
Right.
It was that 5-year stage
Yeah.
that helped it. And frankly, if the governing body had not been happy with that proposal, then that pilot would not have been effectuated, and the project and that vacant bank would still be there.
Well, personally, I'm all in favor of high-end development on that corner. I just really want to, before I can vote on anything, I'd like to know what it is. I'd like to know what the plan is. And I've seen, like I said, a plan go by me. There are a couple things on there I liked and a couple things I didn't like. So that's my take on the whole issue.
I have
I want to talk about,
Top level has been usurping the.
yes, I agree.
I do a lot of talking, but I'm done.
Okay, I would like to talk about J. J historically has always been commercial. At one time, it was a gas station for years. So I think that should be redesignated as a redevelopment area. I think that should go into the yellow, because it would make sense to make that all yellow all the way to the corner. And like I said, historically, it was commercial and was developed.
Didn't you say that this had already been, like, mapped out, 14 years ago or 16 years ago or whatever? So why do we have to act on it again if it was already decided on all those years ago?
So the reason was, and I tried to explain that a little bit.
Just the yellow, just the yellow.
Because it was done in 2004 and then amended in 2007. In 2013, I believe it was, there were significant changes in the statutory criteria. There were changes again in 2018 or 19. But most importantly, the noticing requirements and the designation as specifically calling out condemnation redevelopment area or non-condemnation redevelopment
Gotcha.
area. So in discussions with Mr. Gillespie, we both felt more comfortable that if something's going to move forward, we need to make sure we're not jumping into this. We cross our T's, we dot our I's, let's do this in accordance with the newest legislation.
And
Scott?
why this might not be appropriate at this level, there's also been changes in wetland laws and other types of laws that might have affected what we did 16 years ago.
And I reviewed those plans. The plan that was written years ago and the plan that we write now, I cannot change the state's applicable wetlands laws as it relates to the designation or transition areas. They will still have to, if any developer as part of their site plan or subdivision approval, even in the redevelopment area, still has to get every county, every other state approval for wetlands, transition areas, everything. All those protections remain in place if at any point it
Scott, the 2003-4, the first redevelopment plan, am I wrong, or did it only include what is now in yellow on your,
I believe it was the yellow and pink, it did not include parcel Q.
didn't include the pink for sure, might have included parcel J,
Yeah.
Right.
but it didn't include Q,
Q
if my memory serves.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
don't
think the
think it did either.
2007 amendment added parcel Q.
Did add Q. All right, another issue apropos of wetlands. It's always seemed to me, just as a citizen, that the big impediment to developing the yellow parcel over the years has been the wetlands, which make it just difficult to do something. Now, that's a curse for the lot, but it might be a benefit for the town, because it seems to me that wetland area pushes the developer into a multi-use development of this parcel because the deep areas aren't suited for commercial, highway commercial.
And it's not long enough to put a big box on it.
And it's not long enough to put a
So
big,
you're saying
a Walmart or something.
development along 38 is really going to have to be sort of an aggregation of smaller sites.
Well, I don't know about smaller sites, but I mean, it suggests that, that strip along 38, it's as deep as, or goes back as far as the wetlands, is where the commercial development's going to occur. And you've even suggested that the back end of that merged with Q presents an opportunity for some sort of housing. And then you still have the two corners.
And the plan that we had seen did actually take the residential zoning and expand the residential component out of Lot Q and up into Lot A, converting what would be that part of the highway commercial to a residential land use.
But of course, we can't be assured of that. We're talking hypotheticals here.
It's all hypothetical until a plan actually would be considered by the governing body.
Now, suppose, hypothetically, thinking down the line, suppose this board voted to approve what you're suggesting, but without the pink and without Lot Q. We could do that.
You could, or Lot Q could just be considered as a rehabilitation area.
We could do that. And, but if we did that, if we exempted the pink and Q, based upon the third of the three-part choice that we have associated with the pink, and a developer came in for lots A through J along the front, and coveted Q for residential, there'd be nothing to stop the town from reevaluating it based upon that plan, would there?
There's nothing to stop the town from reevaluating, stopping, or facilitating anything throughout this entire process. That's one of the things that redevelopment does, is it allows a municipality, whose ordinances may be a bit stale in some instances. Almost every municipality I've ever seen, their standards for self-storage says no higher than 1 story. We now know that some of the trends, including in Hainesport, multi-story self-storage is becoming a thing because of land values. So we're seeing 2- and 3-story self-storage. So municipal ordinances can sometimes be stale. What the redevelopment designation allows is a municipality to do something that, if they like, only if they like the proposal, to create some creative zoning, site-specific zoning for that property to try to get some reinvestment. But again, that's discretionary down the road.
May I? This is a takeoff from what these two gentlemen have been talking about, Mr. McLaughlin and Mr. McKay. If I understand you correctly, whatever action we take tonight, the township committee can still do whatever they want. Is that fair?
So, if the board never acts on the designation of this property, then the governing body cannot move forward with a redevelopment grant under the local redevelopment and housing law.
Okay.
The project would cease at that point.
All right, let me,
But
sorry.
even if that happens, the governing body has vested authority at any point in time to create zoning modifications on these parcels, on a parcel on the other side of town, to rezone those properties under their normal course of developing land use ordinances. So things can be effectuated, but some of those incentives, some of those growth incentives of being able to offer some tax exemption and abatement along the corridor are then not able to be used as a tool to incentivize that growth, or get better growth, or better architectural, or better design standards. And that's part of the balance that some municipalities do. They say, we want this to look great. We don't want office. We only want restaurants. We only want this. And in exchange, to incentivize you, because we know the market may be soft in that particular, we have a community who wants a hotel desperately. And they know that the market is soft. And there's a mixed-use project that has a hotel with a commercial component and a residential component. And the municipality is considering a pilot on that hotel, because they realize there's a benefit to the community for that, and they would like to have that as a tenant. But it's completely, again, with the discretionary at the governing body level.
What I was specifically going to say is, if we, as the Joint Land Use Board, and I'm not trying to put something in the member's mind, but just a thought, but it's a takeoff on what Mr. McKay was just saying. If we approve this concept to send back to the Township Committee with a change on Lot Q, make that pink, and J, make it yellow, and as regards to the pink, which would include all the residential ones as well as Lot Q, specify that they are to be left undesignated, remaining in their underlying zone. Can we do that?
Anything you want.
You do, you have that authority, based on the authority that's given to the Joint Land Use Board under the redevelopment law. You have that authority to basically say that we don't think that it is necessary and should be included in the redevelopment area for the property.
Yeah, and if you were to include, the pink in the redevelopment area, just to go one step further, is the potential benefit, and I use that word guardedly, the potential benefit to those pink lot homeowners that they could have if they decided to expand their house, build something bigger, subject to more taxes, that they could have a deferral of taxes, tax increase for 5 years. That would be one benefit.
Yeah, to do a rehabilitation designation, they can get a 5-year tax exemption.
Right, and that's, of course, sort of an illusory benefit if they're happy with what they have and are not going to build some.
Right.
And we're talking about a large addition to really have any material effect.
There's also some benefit for their resale value. There may be someone who is at a point where they don't necessarily want to reinvest in their property, but the person that they sell it to may come in and they want to double the size of the house, or they have a very large family, and then that can actually become a selling tool to incentivize someone, because there could be a tax savings of $5,000-$10,000 over that 5-year period.
If they sell and the redevelopment occurs in that 5-year window.
No, so you can sunset under the plan, but the 5-year period does not start until the actual development happens.
Okay, so you could sunset it for 25 years, and if they sold it, somebody decided to tear the house down and build a new one or build a big addition, assuming you could do that with the land available.
And the example in Bedford is that the Pop Shop's 5-year pilot didn't start until they were completing construction and the property is assessed, and then their 5-year window starts.
Okay.
The same thing, it's been 6 years since we adopted that plan. If somebody else in that rehabilitation area wanted to reinvest in their property, they could ask the municipality to pay for a 5-year exemption and abatement. And of course, it's a short-term tax. So the 5 years would start when they are completing their construction.
But pink lot homeowners, they might or might not find that to really be a benefit at all.
Right.
And then the other possibility that you could argue, I guess, is that if you did the rehabilitation, including pink, the developer comes in, wants to do a master multi-use development of everything, yellow, pink, and green, there's the potential opportunity that the developer might make offers they couldn't resist to sell those properties. But that, of course, presumes that people living there for many, many years want to sell.
And it would be completely voluntary, and that was why I think the governing body was very specific to call this a non-condemnation redevelopment area. Let it be a voluntary development, and if somebody does or does not want to be included or sell their property, that becomes a private matter.
So, the procedural question again. So whatever happens here, I'm noticing that the bulk of the property is still assessed farmland? Is that correct?
Yes.
So the committee would have to change that zoning at some point.
So that would be an assessment issue. It would remain, the zoning, it's still zoned highway commercial.
HC.
What is? The bulk of the property?
Friendship Farms is HC.
Right, and it says, use, okay,
See the zone?
it's highway commercial, okay.
Yeah.
So it's high, yeah, we did that already.
It's
All right,
just farmland assessment.
all right, I got you. It's farmland assessed now, okay. So how did this plan just get into the township? Did Eric, did you meet with an economic development committee at some point? How did this plan that's floating around the township, I don't have a copy of it, but I saw it, how did that get into our hands?
So the landowner approached the township because there is an existing redevelopment plan in place. So that is part of the process. As the board of the town may know from Lawrence Boulevard, Kingsford Commerce Center. When the developer approached the town to say, hey, we think we have a concept that we can move forward with, we'd like to get your thoughts on it. And how do we move forward and what are those steps? That's when Mr. Gillespie and I identified that based on the contents of the 2004-2007 report and the changes in the legislation, that it would be prudent for the governing body to redo the investigation and the designation, as opposed to just moving forward with that older plan. So that's the reason that we're back here today. The governing body in November, as I indicated, specifically asked the Joint Land Use Board to reevaluate those 17 parcels to see if they meet the current statutory requirements. So that's how the
Just for clarification, there's an existing redevelopment plan now. Okay, this is going. Is there anything significantly different between the existing redevelopment plan and what we're looking at here?
So the redevelopment areas are very similar in terms of the outbounds. The concept plan that we saw really only dealt with parcels A and Q. We had an internal discussion with the property owner's representative for the Muschlegel Volkswagen dealership, parcel B, C, I, H, O, B, and J. One of the things that we, from the township standpoint, when we got involved, much like any of the redevelopment plans that we can work on, is how do we minimize negative impacts to neighbors? How do we minimize the number of driveways and curb cuts? What we didn't want to see was these highway parcels carved up into a bunch of 300-foot fronts and having driveways every 30 feet. So we actually, as part of evaluating some of this, we said maybe the two owners should talk to each other because of that synergy. Two projects together have better value than two projects developed separately. It could also give properties access to other roads that they may not have otherwise. So, but there is no plan in place for that. And this is not uncommon that there are people who say, I want to develop, I don't know what it is, I can't get a super gas station convenience store here. They won't come because we don't have the vehicle trips. So we're moving off of there to try to attract some of those, being able to offer some kind of a tax exemption and abatement becomes an attractive element for the landowner to be able to develop what might become difficult to develop purely through the instrument of private capital investment.
And you're suggesting that the possibility that Mulch Lego gets together with Revicchio is enhanced by virtue of the tax abatement incentive?
Frankly, as we get into the process, and if the governing body, if we ever got to the point where we created a new redevelopment plan for this property, the township has the authority to say, you will only have one access, you will only have two accesses, and you must provide cross-access easements to your neighbor, period. You must provide a 30-foot buffer along the residential area. So the governing body has, that's one of the great things about redevelopment, is it gives the towns a pure ability to come up with the best thing that it can be in all regards. When we wrote, your ordinance for lighting is a bit antiquated. It still allows those bright blue seizure lights to be used in parking lots. When we wrote the redevelopment plan for Amesport Commerce Center, the Lawrence Boulevard redevelopment plan, we required 3,000 to 3,500 degree Kelvin LED lights, which have a slightly lower glare. The American Medical Association says no light should be greater than 3,500 degrees Kelvin.
Well, we grant design waivers routinely for those lights.
Right, and if I have anything to do about it, every light that goes on in this town from this point forward will be at 3,000 to 3,500. Less impacts on health to the residents, less impact on health to wildlife, migratory birds, and the AMA says nothing needs to be higher. It shouldn't be higher than 3,500 degrees Kelvin. So we wrote that into the redevelopment plan, and that gives us the flexibility to do those things, to make the project the best it can be by saying where access can and can't be, what those uses are, what the uses can't be.
And that, excuse me. So the planning board would have final say on a lot of the design criteria of this project, or all of it?
So the design criteria and that new ordinance and those design standards are the purview of the governing body to develop. The governing body can include the planning board as little or as much as they choose. You can say, the governing body can say, we're going to redevelop or rezone all this to be single-family residential. Or you can say, we want it to all be some other use. That's your authority. You can also set up a subcommittee or ask the planning board to assist with feedback during that redevelopment plan preparation. It happens in a variety of ways in different municipalities. We usually like to see a subcommittee that has 2 governing body members and 2 planning board members, so there aren't surprises. There's good information exchange and good communication between those boards. Because with all due respect to the governing body, the planning board is the one that deals with land use issues every single month for a long time. And governing body members less so, aside from the 2 who are on the joint land.
And you would be part of that subcommittee? You'd be here? You'd be there?
I sure hope so.
Well, me too. Well, that's interesting, and it kind of turns things a little bit for me, because it was brought up earlier about roads and, and getting in and out of the project, the design, I still didn't, you said the applicant brought a design in here, and gave it to you and John and the administrator?
Yep, and we sat there because there was a redevelopment, and that's what will happen. That's what happened with Lawrence Boulevard. We developed a redevelopment plan. Immediately after that was adopted, after it was designated, we actually had some developers reach out to us to have some discussions about Paul's Tank Farm
Right.
and the Trap Rock properties to say, would the town be agreeable to looking at doing things in here? And that's how the redevelopment happens. And if someone said or proposed something that wasn't appropriate, then it withers on the vine. If someone has a good proposal, then that can get traction at the governing body level. The governing body can choose to include the joint land use board in the development of that redevelopment plan to the extent that they feel is appropriate or would like their feedback.
So who determines, let's say, setbacks?
You
The committee?
bid setbacks, uses, what that zoning is. You can specifically prohibit and say, there will not, shall not be a water park. There shall not be, whatever that list of things that really you have concerns about, you can write in that those are prohibited, and further include a provision that for those properties within a redevelopment area, the developer doesn't have the authority to go before the joint land use board for a D variance, that any use that's proposed in this area can only be permitted by amendment to the redevelopment plan. So in some ways, it creates a greater level of control.
Hard to put a list together of things that you wouldn't want. It's, so many of them are in the eye of the beholder when they arrive.
Because you haven't seen it.
That's right. I mean, clearly you keep mentioning water park, so that's a no-brainer. But beyond water park, what's your list?
And really what it ends up being is, and like we did for Lawrence Boulevard, where there is a concept plan available, we like to actually include that in the redevelopment plan so there are no surprises. Because if we simply said a 478,000 square foot building with this many doors, the board, the public, no one can really visualize what that means on the ground. So when there is a concept plan, we put it in the redevelopment plan. So everybody's expectations are the same. We all have the same set of facts and information moving forward.
The concept plan would be generated by your office, theoretically?
So it can be. A lot of times what happens is a developer, if there is a redevelopment designation here, and there may be some consideration for a pilot on a commercial front, they know that that may be able to get them to entice, let me just say a doctor's office or a cardiologist who wouldn't normally move here, but if they can get a pilot agreement and save that extra money, the developer can actually decrease their rents to try to incentivize some better developers or some better anchors to come in. So what happens 9 times out of 10, if I develop that plan in a bubble, and I say this should be office and this should be this, it doesn't always reflect today's market value. So what we see are market conditions. So what we typically see is the developer comes in and they say, all right, well, we want to do 4-story apartments in this section, and we want to do retail here and something else over here, and gauge the municipality and their appetite for density and height. I usually end up redesigning it myself because the roads don't flow, there's poor interconnection. And then 9 times out of 10, as most of you know, a developer who may say, I want 4-story, is okay with 3-story. So we try to work to do something that's more appropriate with the character of the community and the surrounding neighborhood, and come up with, at the end of the day, a plan that the developer feels comfortable moving forward on financing, and the town feels comfortable with the appropriate design standards like architecture and lighting and buffering. And if at any point the town doesn't feel comfortable, the project stalls and it sits there. one of those that's happened in another community right now. The redevelopment plan stalled because the county was not happy, the redeveloper was not willing to work on a couple of design things.
But the committee back in the 2000s already designated A yellow, and there is the ability for abatements and all that on the yellow. It's more or less the green and the pink.
But only if the governing body agrees.
Right, but it's in place now. We're just trying to add the green and the pink to the mix here.
Bring the designation up to the current legislative.
Okay, right, all
Well,
right.
Scott, I thought I heard you say that the green was added to the plan in 2007.
2007.
So they're already
Okay,
in
sorry.
the redevelopment plan.
Okay.
So the key here is that it's the coordination between BCH&I and OP with the owners of A and Q is what you're trying to facilitate.
Which is the same owner.
Right?
So Scott, if I could ask a question, you had said in the very beginning, a couple hours ago, that a lot of, it's been great though, the access across from Easton Way is integral to this plan or this area in terms of, growth or actual development. And you said that the county oftentimes will not approve egress or ingress that is not directly across from an existing access point, correct? It's
Yeah, so,
generally,
yeah, that's always a preferred configuration. So they look at aligning wherever possible. They have certain offset standards from an adjacent driveway on the same side, an adjacent driveway on the opposite side. Then they also have distance standards back in the intersection. Because first, and so does the state, frankly. Because as we all know, the state decides anything that happens on or near any of their highways. They don't want anything at all to slow down their through movements. The county has their jurisdiction, and nobody wants to have a driveway come out where there are cars queuing, because then it creates a problem on the site. It creates a problem with people trying to get off of the county or state road and onto the property. So they try to get those driveway throats further back away from intersections, state highways, and align where possible.
so based on your experience, if Q is not part of this plan, as it already is, it's already part of a redevelopment plan. Right now, we're just doing the investigation. But if Q is not part of that, there's a good chance that the access point onto Hainesport Mount Laurel Road, which potentially, based on our conversation, is for residential, because that side, the conceptual, which quite frankly is, from what I understand, has changed multiple times, that could affect negatively the development, the whole project. Could it?
That's my understanding, yeah, because the project had, like I said, a residential component that came in through Q and consumed a small part of the rear of parcel A that was sort of had greatly reduced visibility from the highway frontage. So it's really from the concept plan that we had seen, the concept plans, I should say, because they work on that. It was not a matter of the highway commercial zone coming closer to the existing residents. It was a matter of the existing residential area expanding into some of that highway zone. And even into the behind parcels, EFGL,
Right. Because I remember when we talked about conceptuals, when we first met back in 2018 with the Economic Development Committee, which is established by the Township Committee, or by the mayor, which includes 2 committee members, myself, our professionals who are appointed. When we sat down in 2018, that was one conceptual, and then last year we sat with, I think it was 2 new committee members as part of the Economic Development Committee. in that last conceptual that we saw, the residential component would have access onto and off of Mount Laurel Road, but all of the rest of the commercial would just be Route 38. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to hear from members of the public on this, and it seems like we have a few out there.
Mr. Kingsbury, is there a certain point that we have to get to where we then turn it over to? Anytime? Yeah, I was going to do the same thing.
Yeah. I just didn't want to leave the public comment to the very end, because the public comment might spur other questions by the board.
Okay, yeah, I agree, definitely. Okay, anybody in public? Before we get into public, I just want to recognize that the former mayor, Mr. Betcher, is in the audience listening to us. Thank you for coming. Anybody want to make any comments? Mr. Betcher's boss, Mrs. Betcher. They have to be sworn in, yes? Do not have to be sworn in, okay.
No, I can't do it.
No,
You don't have to be sworn in.
you don't have to be sworn in.
Oh.
Just say what you'd like to say.
Malma Betcher. I live at 520 Hainsport, Mount Laurel Road. My property is L and K. Since when did A become part of B, C, I, H, P, and D? I thought they were two separate owners.
They are.
So you're saying that this is all the yellow now, instead of just the owner of A?
No, there's still, every single one of those parcels, every one of those lots, the ownership is exactly the same as it has been.
As what?
As it has been. The ownership has not changed. They are all still individual.
Well, I do believe J belongs to what used to be Bud Bachman.
Right, but it's still its own individual parcel, and I understand it's in common ownership
Okay,
with
that,
the principals of Muschleichel, who own the adjacent,
but you're speaking for him also, when you include what you want to do, and like Bruce said, we still don't know what it is.
right, so we don't want to do anything at all. All this plan does would authorize the township committee to then start those discussions with developers to perhaps consider a plan to look at different uses or zoning.
And that includes Bachman's.
It does, within the area.
Okay, I have a problem. Back on May 11th, 1970, 1970-2, Sexton Avenue was vacated, a portion of it. I own a portion of that. And the map does not look like anything like the map that Harry Bowman drew on my property. I asked Bud Bachman one time, would he consider straightening that? He said no. My garage now sits further back than anybody owns any property along that pink, because of that inconsistency of that map drawing. And there's a big hole that comes in between my next door neighbor, F and G. It's not a straight line, and it's not even correct on my lot.
Are you referring to the tax map?
Yes, I said I'm L and K.
Right. So generally speaking, tax maps are drawn by hand, and they're meant to be a general representation of where the lots are approximately. your actual property that is shown on your title survey or your deed will be the governing instrument for the property that you own. So whether the line has a slight jog or a larger jog, or whether it's straight across, the owner of parcel B or parcel A and parcel D, their deed and your title survey should line up exactly with yours. Whatever that line is, the line is. Tax maps have been drawn by hand for decades, and you're trying to draw a lot at 1,000 scale, and sometimes that pen isn't always perfect. So your lot, I'm telling you that tax maps are often inherently, the line may zig like this, but it actually is more dramatic on your deed or your title survey. So whatever land you own based on your title survey and your deed is the land that you own, regardless of what shape the tax map may have.
Because the way that is, I go out and go up half of Sexton Avenue, then it comes down in here. There's a big little hunk in there. What are they gonna do with that? You gotta stay 30 feet, 20 feet, 50 feet, 60 feet? I don't know.
Well, there is no proposal now. That would, as I was trying to explain to the board before, the redevelopment plan would be the next phase. That's where any proposed uses, setbacks, buffering requirements, lighting, shielding, any of those other provisions would be considered by the township committee and or the planning board. And I would imagine, based on what I'm hearing tonight, the significant input from the public, and there is a requirement for multiple additional public hearings before any developer's proposal would come before township committee or before the board.
Well, I'm still with Bruce on not knowing what's going there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Yes, sir. You just step forward and give us your name. You don't have to be sworn in, but just come up to the microphone, okay? Because there are other people listening to this meeting remotely.
I do have a loud background. Bud Burns, 2515 Fostertown Road. It's, right now, this really doesn't affect me. My lot is 402, goes right back up to Eric's property. But what I'm concerned with, we've been around here since 77, and you see things changing. I want to see more development. But I get back to what you keep on saying. What are we buying here? You know, I know it's not a water park. I heard that 100 times. But my problem is property Q. You talk about how the roads have to go straight on through. Well, that's a perfect lot for the road to go straight on through, if that was included in everything else. That would be my concern.
Straight on through from where to where?
Well, we're talking about how roads, you know, you don't want to have one here and then another one over here. I believe Easton Way goes right up to Q.
Easton Way is right between the words Mount Laurel on that road.
Which is lot Q.
Pardon me?
Which is lot Q.
Yeah, it goes straight across the lot Q, yeah.
So that lot, for some reason, got hooked up with everything else. That'd be a perfect lane for a road to go straight on through a back way to that development. Then it would affect me.
Are you saying if that connected out to Route 38?
If it went into this, it would have went into A. If Q and A and all the other ones were all together, now you have a perfect access off of Mount Laurel Hansford Road.
So the one thing I did mention to the board was that the concept plan that we had seen, there was no connection between the commercial property along Route 38 and through Q to Hainsport Mount Laurel Road. It was just a connection opposite Easton for, frankly, for residential development to happen on Q and to actually push up into parcel A.
Okay.
But there was no extra connection up to Route 38 or out to all the commercial areas.
So you're saying that's a concept.
Properties.
What
So
would
that's-
happen if this came to fruition here?
Well, I don't want to speak for the governing body or the board, but I have a pretty strong sense that this board would say, under no circumstances do we want a major road connection connecting Route 38. Frankly, I don't think DOT would permit it.
Right.
But hearing the concerns of the board and the mayor, who's also obviously the governing body,
Yeah.
that traffic concerns are always a major issue with this board, recognizing and trying to minimize those wherever possible. So just to clarify,
Okay.
the concept plan, which would be the next step that we saw, it was not connecting up through the entire, it was literally just expanding to a residential, adding some more residential in there instead of more commercial.
So the potential, more residential could be in Q, is what you're saying, or the back end of A?
That Q, the residential area that would be developed on Q would then extend up into A. So it would be, it would actually sort of, potential to push commercial development even further away from your back property line. Right now, it looks like you're about 275 feet
Right.
from the back of that yellow commercial line.
Yes.
Parcel A. The commercial, the concept plan that we had seen at the end of last year actually moved the commercial even further up, closer to Route 38, and extended the residential.
So the residential will be on the back end, like closer to
Would
the,
be on Q, and then kind of push north. And if I can sort of,
that's good, I'll tell it anyway.
so your lot is right here,
Yes, well, it's a,
and you are 275.96 feet from Lot A.
yes.
The concept plan that we saw took the residential of Lot Q and actually extended that up into the back of Lot A. So it would actually have the commercial development be further away from you. There was no road interconnection.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. I have a question, the simple fact that, remember?
Ma'am, step up to the microphone because other people are listening to this.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What is your name, please?
Patty Burns.
Okay.
I'm his wife, Foster Town Road.
Okay.
Back, it was before or after the water park, the guy Charles that you were talking about, he approached me, he approached Keynes, which is not there anymore, and Eric. Remember Eric, we had that conversation. And they wanted to build a development. They wanted to get rid of our house and put an access road into the development going into that property, like through Eric's property, going out towards 38. Okay? Now, Gloucester Town Road and Haynes Park, Laurel Road are both county roads. The county would not approve it because the developer did not want to put in 4 lanes of traffic at that intersection. I'm just wondering if you're saying about residential being expanded, what's that going to do with the drainage too? I've always had a drain problem, especially when Eric got rid, well, thank God Eric got rid of that pool. It was there because we always had water running that way. And then when they built Haynesburg Chase, coming right down Eastern Way, and that retention pond has never had water in it, as far as I can ever remember. It's been 40-some years, so I'm just worried about drainage.
So
We're well and septic.
as a project moves forward, just like any development, they have to comply with the New Jersey Stormwater Management Regulations. That addresses the quality and quantity of runoff, and there can't be any increase in runoff from the property after it's developed from its pre-development runoff. That's why you see these enormous retention basins. The one thing I will say is, from the old Bachman site, there's a whole lot of asphalt out there now, and that was built, I think, late 50s, and there's no stormwater management out there now. So anything that hits that now, that roof, and any of that asphalt that's left out there, it's just completely running off.
Well, I'm just more concerned what's coming from Haynesburg Chase, because at one point, you could actually, and look here, I don't know what the other name of the street is, across from Noden's. That one. the water, you would actually see the water come across the road. And the county had came in and gave everybody one of those, like, lift, whatever you want to call it, at the end of everybody's driveway. And then all that did was just pull the water back into everybody's property. It couldn't go anywhere. So that's a big concern.
So one of the
Especially since
things-
we're all in septic.
Right. One of the things that the county is very good about is when a developer shows up and they want to develop on a county road, the county takes that as an opportunity to sometimes fix existing problems. When they come in for their accel and decel lanes or shoulder widening, they can pick up drainage onto their site and accommodate that where there's drainage problems that exist in an area.
And now another question I have. Since that strip of Fostertown Road is what they call it a dead area, will never have city water, will never have city sewer, okay? Way back when, the only way we were going to get it, and the township actually told us this, was if somebody developed that property and had to come off of the highway or come off of Mount Laurel Hainsford Road to get into us, then we could demand that they have to hook us up. Septic systems only last so long. I just put a new well in 2 years ago, so.
Okay.
So that's a concern
So
also.
it would be your preference for that to happen.
I just want to talk to someone about that and negotiate that, and you are in the 60s, you're not going to be here forever.
Scott, apropos of that question, the sewer line runs down Hainesport Mount Laurel Road, but I don't think there's any sewer in 38, is there?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Stops.
Yeah.
Just after Eastern Way, it stops. Some of them are back-ended that are on route or on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road.
Well, I guess the point is, the 508 line runs like the back line of Hainesport Chase is the end of the sewer. And water too, I think, actually. But how would you get sewer and water into the frontage on Route 38 in this theoretical development? Would have to come through, either have to be sent up maybe from the intersection of Route 38 and Hainesport Mount Laurel Road, or elsewhere on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road.
That's something, obviously, to develop commercial, they're going to need to figure out
Right.
where they're going to get that.
There is a sewer line that's already there, correct? It stops.
What's that?
There's a sewer line that's already on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road. It just stops at a certain property.
It probably stops at Easton Way or right in that vicinity.
I mean, I could certainly call Mr. Mayberry tomorrow and find out where their main sewer line runs, and
Well, I was going to suggest that, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it's out of order, but we have the applicant sitting here.
Yeah, I know.
And I have a couple questions for him. And they're all to try to help. They're not to hurt, Eric. So could I ask that he come up?
Yeah,
maybe
Mrs.
answer a
Byrne,
couple questions
I just
from the
wanted
board?
to thank Mrs. Byrne for her comments, okay?
Yeah, that's important, ma'am, that we know that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the husband too, yeah, he's...
I said thank you to you before. No, I said it to you before, when you went to sit down. Okay.
Eric, we're hearing that, hi, Eric.
Mr. Ravicki.
Does he have to be sworn in, Bob?
No.
Okay, so we're hearing three different mayors.
Can I ask a couple questions before I forget them, or?
No, but-
Go ahead.
Eric Ravicchio, 620 Hainesport Mount Laurel Road.
Okay. You want to ask them a question?
And C. No, I wanted to ask one of her direct questions.
Sure, I guess.
As far as the drainage is concerned, most of my lot, naturally pitches towards your lot. Just natural grade comes that way. So if this is developed, all that water would be contained either under drain or regular storm sewer. That would be piped out, joining the system that's already on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road, and go out towards Route 30. So it would actually be a benefit toward drainage. As far as the sewer is concerned, if there's an opportunity, I know you're considerably lower, and I know you will not gravity to our sewer. So if it were, it most likely would have to be rejected. And if there were an opportunity for an easement for you to get sewer, I'm open to that. But I don't want to pay for it. If you guys want to put your sewer in and run an ejector, I'm completely open to that.
Pump station, the sewer is right on Nelson.
To answer the other sewer question that came up, I bought my primary residence in 1998. And in 1999, I renovated, I moved into it, and we put an 8-inch sewer main from the Easton Way connection. That's the last manhole. And right there, we pulled the 8-inch main back, and it's been stubbed, and I connected into it. Our project that we currently have that we're looking at, talking about capacities, that would service the entire project all the way from the entrance at Easton Way, all the way out to Route 38 and all the way to Fostertown. However, it will not be able to be gravity fed. There would be a pump station somewhere on the eastbound side of Route 38, so the westbound side would drain to essentially a pump station. That lift station would then connect to our gravity system, which would then connect to the east.
And I'm not worried about sewer, and I'm not worried about that. So we had 3 different mayors, 3 different, coupled economic development committees. Some of the committee members were here long ago, they're not here. I'm going to ask a timing issue of Bob and Paula and even Paula Tiver. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to get this thing rolling under one administration, under one planning board, with a concept? So if we ask the applicant to sit down with a subcommittee and come in here with some sort of a concept, 2 members of the planning board, 2 members of the committee, what's a timing issue, which is, I'm going to stop myself. Do you have a concept that you want to move forward with now, Eric?
Well, you keep asking, what do we want to bring in? And if I tell you what I want to bring in, it's just my opinion. I could tell you all of Hainsport Chase says, bring in a Chick-fil-A. I would say, I would love to see a Chick-fil-A. If Chick-fil-A doesn't want to come, Chick-fil-A
No, I understand that, but do you know what you want to do? Do you have an idea what your footprints are as far as residential?
There would be a residential element, and there would be a highway commercial element. What those users are,
well, yeah.
If I told you anybody, I would be lying to you.
We understand.
We don't have a user.
Okay.
We don't have a residential user at this time. So right now, whatever it is, it's that we're looking to attract those users, the final users. And right now, when we go and see those users, they go, what do you got? And we go, we don't know what we got.
But it'd be nice if you had some sort of a plan that was adopted or endorsed by the town, which you don't have right now, to
And
help
it has
you
to be
do
a
that.
constant working plan, because what ends up happening, if I draw a plan that shows a Chick-fil-A on it, that's great, you guys love it, and then I say Chick-fil-A, they don't come.
Well, they usually show a proposed pad site. We don't need to get specific, but we're talking about a residential component. We're talking about some road openings to get into the project. So, what I'd like to see, personally, is to sit down, get some sort of something nailed down that we can bite into and agree on. And I think you found that we're pretty agreeable,
Yeah, that's
pretty agreeable to help
started this
develop
process
that.
again this time, just like the last time. The biggest thing that has changed, to give you the full history and the correct history, really the property, the A property, and I'll call it the D property, that came later. That was in my family since 1960. Last year, 15 months ago, we purchased that from my family and the other 24 partners that were involved in it.
Right.
So we have ultimate control now.
Right.
We will be developing this. We will make it happen. There will not be a third party where we say, okay, Mr. Water Park user, Mr. Charles Gallup, any of those people, where we're kind of at their mercy. We just have a contract. They go and try and talk to you guys, and if they can't do it, it blows up. We are the developer, and we are.
So
the
would you be-
landowner,
would you-
and we live here.
I got you. Would you be in favor of sitting down with a subcommittee of 2 members of the planning board, 2 members of the committee, and how far, from a timing issue, you're not looking for any sort of approval, subdivision, and that sort of thing, but we're just talking zoning. If you have a potential developer, they're going to want to know it's zoned the way you need it zoned. And to do that, we're going to need a plan. We're going to need something to talk about.
100%, that is.
So how fast could we, you know, if you're looking to do that, and I'm going to ask the two Paulas and Scott, if we got together with a plan, how fast could the zoning issue, providing the subcommittee agreed on, and again, things change, you know, a little bit, but how long would it take? Yeah, because we're going to have another administration probably next year, another mayor possibly, another, you know, committee members. You know, we're going to be starting all over again, and I don't want to be jamming that down somebody else's throat.
Right, so if Eric has a concept, the board could carry, and this hearing can be adjourned, carry to the next meeting. And that would give a subcommittee an opportunity to have a meeting with Eric, take a look at that concept plan, and to make sure that the governing body and that subcommittee has some level of comfort. Not enough comfort level to say we recommend a redevelopment plan, but just enough comfort level to say we think we're okay doing the designation determination. And then that next step is when the actual redevelopment of zoning would happen. But I understand that the board and the governing body may want to see that concept before the designation is done. And
I would think, I mean, I don't know, but I would think they'd want to see it.
you have that right.
And if he's got his zoning approvals, his thing is a lot more attractive to whatever you need to do, whether, you know, if you want to do it yourself or bring somebody in, you're all, you know, you almost, you don't have a subdivision, I mean, a plan, you know, approved, but you have your old zone ready to go with your zoning and everything.
Mr. Rubicchio, how do you bring Muschlegel into this discussion? Because it seems to me the opportunities for development are greatly enlarged if you deal with the yellow as one development parcel.
We've been asked many times over the past 30, 35 years to do that. We've talked to the owners before, Mike Muschlegel, going back to Bachman days. And it's been, quote, too much money. Or I would say money that would be what it would get if it were an approved use. Basically, the owners that are there, and I don't want to speak for them, they're not here tonight that I know of.
The owners are here.
Oh, hey, hello, how are you? What I want to say...
So what I'll do is, when you're finished answering, we'll ask him to answer.
And that's Gino, I believe.
Okay.
What we can say is that their money that they want to get for the property, it's something that I personally cannot take down. In other words, I wouldn't be buying it myself and saying, oh, great, let's add these together. They're an independent owner, and we're an independent owner. If we can connect them, that's wonderful. If somebody comes in and they say they want to build a building that bridges the two properties, I'm totally for that. What I'm not for is saying, oh, let me go buy that piece of property so I can solve another problem.
Sounds like he needs you more than you need him.
I'm not sure we need each other, but for certain projects, we could need each other.
He's got a very odd-shaped piece of property.
But he's got a good corner, too.
You got a corner, too.
But from the township standpoint, one of the things that we had identified very early on is the need for at least a driveway interconnection between those two properties to eliminate unnecessary trips out onto Route 38 for somebody that wants to go from the Long Bridge property and go to one retail use here. And if they want to go to a use over here, they then have to get out, get on Route 38 and come. So creating...
Sure, an interconnect is essential.
Between the two. And under redevelopment, the township has the right to say, as a condition of any development of this property, you shall provide this interconnection between the two. Under traditional zoning, the town can't require that. They have the right to develop how they see fit.
So my question didn't really get answered. So if we decide, again, I'm just talking for me, if the decision was made to sort of table this for a subcommittee hearing. Could this get on the next planning board hearing? Is that possible? And then we'd have somewhat of a, and I know concepts change, and somebody might, you say, might want to put a Burger King, or somebody might want to put something, I get it, we've all seen that. But the basic concept is there with, with a pad site as such, or possibly a possible restaurant, whatever, that's the details. But the plan is the thing that, and how you're getting in and out of this place, and how far close the potential homes are going to be to adjacent prop. There's some details that need to be looked at. So we could get something worked out, get it on the next planning board hearing, and then the next step would be, would the applicant necessarily request the zoning change, or is that something the municipality would take on themselves?
Bruce, why haven't you asked me to see this before tonight?
Pardon me?
Why haven't you asked to see this before tonight?
I don't know if it's necessarily up to me to ask, I'm just, because there's a lot of people here also, and I think, and I'm not going to step out in front of the board,
So the review of a specific concept plan would not be binding on the board of the town or the applicant, and it doesn't change his zoning. All it does is it would give the board a comfort level to say, okay, so this is part of what the current vision is. Once the designation study is done, then the redevelopment plan can get developed based on that concept or a slightly revised concept. And it may have, again, we would never say it has to be a Chick-fil-A, but if fast food is a permitted use, and the township and the board would be comfortable with one fast food, then we can say the following uses in the following proportions. Not more than 33% of the commercial square footage can be fast food. So you don't have a line of 4 fast foods if that's not what you want. If you do want that, that can be written in as well.
Yeah, it's not. Fast food, I'm pretty sure, isn't allowed, but that's irrelevant.
Right.
It's what does he want to do, and to take steps,
Okay.
I don't want to hold him up.
We've been going through this a lot. It's getting late. And what Mr. Taylor just said is you're talking about zoning. So if you approve this and include, I would include J in part of the yellow, but that's me. But if you approve this as zoning, then when you go to your next step for redevelopment, then is when you can come in with your two people from each, 2 people from here and 2 people from the committee.
That's normally what we see it happen at the redevelopment plan phase, but if the mayor or the board would feel more comfortable having that subcommittee meeting convene now to review a potential concept plan before the designation is finished.
I think what Mr. Ravicchio, and we never did hear from the guy that's on the phone probably, I think what he's saying is he needs zoning in place for us to move to that review. So if you don't want to, and from what and I've been here, I was on early on. So if you don't have that zoning in place, you're not going to attract anybody to do that kind of a review. So I think that's what you're saying. And now you can tell me differently if you want me. But I think we should wind this up, right now. And I think we should come up with a proposal, unless there's more people out there. I don't want to cut off people that want to talk. But, residents. But I think we need to move on and stop rehashing what we've been saying all night long.
Mr. Chairman, David Frank on behalf of the North Lake Apartments.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. Taylor, good evening. Mr. Kingsbury, good evening. Members of the board. I want to put in my 2 cents that we are very happy and willing to participate in a subcommittee meeting to go over with members of the governing body and board and your professionals our concept plans for the parcels that we control. We have, in fact, had, I think, significant contact with Mr. Revicchio. Our current concept plan does provide for cross-access, as discussed by Mr. Taylor. It does pull our development away from the residential properties using basins as buffers to achieve that. I think that overall you'd be very pleased with that. Having said that, though, as Mr. Taylor laid out, as the most recent board member, I think, was sort of alluding to as well, typically this current exercise that you're doing of analyzing whether the property is qualified to be included in an area in need of redevelopment or in need of rehabilitation is really an exercise based on the current condition of the properties. What are they as opposed to what are they going to become? And what is enabled by the designation that reflects what they are, which is in need of redevelopment or rehabilitation, is the kind of negotiation, Mr. Mayor, that you were thinking about, and discussion, and open discussion between the developers, plural, and the municipality about developing a shared vision for how to develop these parcels. So, and I appreciate very much, I think we would like to see parcel J included in the redevelopment area. We'd like to participate however it plays out. We would like to be there with you doing this. But I think, as an attorney, I think the law actually thinks about the redevelopment process and the designation that you're being asked to make this evening as enabling the negotiations you want to make with us in discussions, as opposed to being the result of them. The result of those discussions is the development of a plan that's enacted by ordinance that embodies the use and bulk and design standards that you want and that we can agree to, we can negotiate. Normally in zoning, we can't do that. Contract zoning isn't allowed. I'm sure Mr. Kingsbury will tell you that. So I would hope that you could act on this evening. If you can, I certainly understand it. And whatever happens, we'd like to have a seat at the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rivicki, do you have anything else you want to say? I just want to see if anybody else has.
Nope, I'm good.
Anybody else in the audience want to make a comment? Okay, no, hearing no. Is there anybody else online that has any comments?
There's a second person online, but they're not.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to solicit a comment from anybody who's listening or out in the audience, and that is from homeowners in the pink zone as to how they feel about the possibility that they could be included in the redevelopment district. Are you for it? Are you against it? Do you have questions? Or is no one?
I think if I could, the gentleman, do you live in what's called the pink zone here? If you mind my asking you? Yes? No, okay. And so it's just Mr. and Mrs. Betcher?
So it's just Mr. and Mrs. Betcher?
And Mr. and Mrs. Berger?
They're not in the pink?
No, they're not in the pink, but they're
So 30 days from now, we'd have that answer from these pink people in the pink.
Yeah.
We'd know that.
Yep.
I'll volunteer to knock on their doors.
They
I don't know what, pardon me?
they received notice of this meeting because it's a public hearing.
Yeah, but yeah, I hear you.
Did they
That's the legal side.
understand
No, I don't know if they do.
We had Mr. and Mrs. Betcher's neighbor come in and review the plan and the map and ask those questions, and they did understand.
But again, that has no real relevance to what,
Which neighbor?
No. I think they're your neighbor, Lot 10, Lot F, I believe.
I don't know if that has any relevance to this project.
Jennifer Double.
I'd like to hear from them.
Me too.
Mr. Patel?
Patel?
No,
Patel?
do it.
I'd have to see a property.
That's the motion.
Yeah. The lady in the back row had a question.
2.5 hours.
What were you going to take?
You don't have to be sworn in, just state your name and what your...
Till next month.
23 Easton Way. I've been listening all night to this back and forth a lot. But you're right, look into it deeper, because a few minutes up the road, not even minutes, Mount Laurel, and they're developing like a city. I believe it's still going through. And we need to really be aware of that, because traffic will be insane on 38. I'm just saying, does anyone know that a lot is going in there? On Route 38, townhomes,
Right.
medical buildings, they're all going in.
Yeah, that's
I'm not
a...
saying that, you know, if they want to develop something, you know, to move forward, but to get too busy with what they're going to put in or plan to put in, everyone has to think about that. Thank you.
Mr. Ravicchio, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Ravicchio, you're aware that's going on up there, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna close this, and 2 people from the Joint Land Use Board and 2 people from the Township Committee with Mr. Taylor, Mr. Ravicchio, and the gentleman representing Muleslager. I don't know his last name.
David Frank.
Okay.
I'll jump on the board for the subcommittee, because I've done this on the other end.
Okay. I'll sign up for it too. Unless somebody else has a burning desire. I'm going to step on anybody's toes.
Again, I still haven't had my question answered, so now now maybe we're going to push this out 30 days. So the zoning, say this happened tonight, would the Township Committee get a case to change when would the Township Committee get the next step if this passed tonight?
So, and I'll take 2 steps and go back over that again. If the board was completely comfortable with the designation study and say, yes, we want to designate this redevelopment, rehabilitation either, then the governing body, they acknowledge that and pass a resolution adopting this with that designation. The next step, which is the zoning, sometimes can happen anywhere from a month to 3 years after that designation. A lot of times that designation doesn't happen. As one of the board members was mentioning, a lot of times the developer won't even spend $5,000 or $10,000 on a concept plan until the municipality has taken the first step. Then the developer will invest some money to say, hey, we'll do a concept plan. They show the town that concept plan. Like I said, maybe it had 1 extra story or buildings or the commercials too far back, whatever those things are, until everybody has a comfort level, mainly the governing body. And then the governing body decides, hopefully through a joint subcommittee here, that yes, we are finally comfortable with the overall character of this proposal, and then the zoning gets put into a redevelopment plan. So that redevelopment plan, at a minimum, it takes 3 months after any kind of a designation, and that's moving very, very quickly. It normally takes more than.
Well, what I would ask is, again, let's sit down, get a comfort level for the concept, and then do it. And I'm sure there's going to be a meeting of the minds on a concept. I'm sure it's going to happen. And then do everything that we can in our power to try to make up for this lost 30 days. But I just think that certain of us need a little more of a comfort level to even start down this road. And that's the only thing I would say. That and I know Paula, and both Paulas will do whatever they can to get this thing moving. But I think under this set of planning board individuals and the committee, let's try to get it. No.
I think we should move forward with this redevelopment where, what's the other one? What's the other word? Rehabilitation. You want to, the yellow, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the man that was online, but he wanted J included in the yellow part between Mr. Ravicchio and Mr. Frank. Those two areas become all yellow. And that's all you have to include tonight. You can leave the green and the pink as what's the word I want? Rehabilitation. And then after we come back as the committee, then you can decide, hey, we want to really include this other green, or we really want to, we've talked to the people in the pink, and they really would like to be in the other. And you can do that, you can change that. Because if you don't keep moving forward, you will lose, like has happened before. And why we don't always know, and why everything goes fairly quickly sometimes that's how it has to go. So I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you're ready, but I'm definitely ready to have a proposal put forward. And then that can be, continue.
I'm going to second what Tish says. I'm going to second what Tish says also, because, Mr. Mayor, if we're going to ask for him to present a concept plan, I mean, you're asking for him to put forth a lot of money to show you something that may or may not get approved. And he needs this in place first before he can move forward. And this is just, to me, it's just reaffirming what was already done years ago by the land use board to begin with. So, I mean, I agree with Tish, just include J with it for tonight, if that's what makes everybody comfortable, and you can deal with Q when the time comes. It's already zoned that way.
I don't think we're asking Mr. Ravicchio, or, what was the name of the gentleman, the attorney that's on the line?
Mr. Frank.
Mr. Franklin?
Mr. Frank.
Frank, okay, Mr. Frank. We're not asking them to put together a preliminary site plan or anything along those lines.
Yes, that's what he wants.
He wants a concept.
He wants a concept.
That's, a concept is just two people from the township committee, two people from the joint land use board, sitting down with Mr. Ravicchio and Mr. Frank, or his designee, and just say, talk to us. What are you going to put here? You know, I mean, you're going to put gas stations on there? You're going to put a bar? You know, well, I can tell you won't put a gas station there, first of all, because that has to be approved here. No, I'm kidding, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, there are certain obvious things that, we're dead set against doing, but we're also in favor of moving forward and having you develop the property, and as long as everybody's rights are respected.
Mr. Chairman, to move forward, you have to do this. If you're going to move forward, for them to move forward in a reasonable amount of time, you're going to have to complete this section, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what we really can and can't do. We're just reaffirming what's already in place. We're only changing basically Lot J, correct?
Q.
Well, Q, we said we were going to wait.
It's already in the current redevelopment plan.
Q was a different issue. We just said we were going to put J in with the yellow as the rehabilitation. And Mr. Taylor, you're going to have to make sure I'm saying the right words. And then, and put the rest into, what was the term?
And Scott, I have to ask this again. There is a redevelopment plan in place right now, correct? But this is going to replace that.
Yes, and that prior redevelopment plan will be rescinded.
Right, but the current one in place already has Q and J in there, in the plan. So it's a reaffirmation of what's currently existing.
It's not a reaffirmation, it's a new plan. It's all new.
No, it's
The
not.
development that's proposed is all new.
No.
Well, the development is something else.
And what Tish said would delay it 30 days anyway, because you're talking about coming back for the pink and the Q anyway. So you're not gaining.
Now you come back when you have a development.
You're not gaining anything.
When you have it, but you don't, if you had been like that, you should have had them earlier.
No, bring it to
But you already have this redevelopment plan.
Do?
And-
Where is it?
In 204, we did one, we did it again in 207. And now it's come back because of some of the changes basically from the state. And maybe some of those things will be reflected when he comes in for a redevelopment. When he comes in for the redevelopment, that's when you want to have that committee, before you come before us. A lot of times it's an economic committee, a lot of times it's, I don't know what other committees you call it in the, your level, Mr. McLaughlin. But you have to, all you're doing is you're reaffirming this. And what that allows is Mr. Frank and Mr. Ravicchio to say to a potential buyer or developer, I guess is the correct term, we have this in place. Now, our next step is to go before them again on the second phase. Are you willing to come, what kind of thing would you be willing to put in here, knowing that this is in place?
Ready?
I'm going to make a motion to continue this hearing to the next regular planning board, joint land use board meeting, to give the subcommittee that we already have volunteers on a chance to meet with the committee and with Mr. Frank's representatives and Mr. Ravicchio's representatives, and then have that meeting be the subject of a report back so we can understand it for the next meeting and then take a vote at that time.
I don't.
So my motion is a simple motion to table, to adjourn this or continue this until next week, and the reasons to do that, I've already put on the record. That's my motion. Yeah, I don't have, it's the next regular meeting, so it would be
August 5th,
August 5th.
7 p.m.
Okay. If somebody, it doesn't, a motion to table takes precedence over everything. And that's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes. So there's no discussion, there's no vote, that's it. That's Robert's Rules of Order.
That's Robert's rules?
Yes, it is.
Then that's it.
Okay.
Well, and I'll second, and I'm not asking the applicant to spend one dime. As far as I'm concerned, he can put it on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
There's no great amount of detail.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll second it.
Well, all right, that's done then.
Lost the
Chairman, I'll defer to you on Robert's rules.
Okay, well, I looked it up for the mayor once before.
Did we adopt Robert's rules?
Okay, moving forward. It's going to be tabled to the next meeting, that's it. There's no discussion, no vote. Because that's what Robert's Rule of Order says. If there's a motion and a second to table,
I think it should be voted on. I've never seen a motion.
Let him vote.
Continue.
If they
Fine.
push it through, push it
Fine.
through.
It's already
Fine.
second. If it's a, if
Okay.
it's
I
a
mean,
motion,
let them vote. Everybody has their own opinion. I mean, I think they should vote. If they want to
you
move
want a
forward.
roll call vote or an all in favor? Which one do you want to do? Roll call?
Motion is table, so we should have a roll call.
Okay.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall,
No.
Mrs. Kelly,
No.
Mrs. Baggio,
No.
Mrs. Costco,
Yes.
Mr. Prolfifer,
Yes.
Mr. Silk,
No.
Mr. Tricocci,
Yes.
five. Five yeses, 4 noes.
Motion passed. Okay, moving on to next order of business of the minutes of the January 21st, 2020 meeting and the February 5th, 2020 meeting. Need a motion and a second that they're
We need to do
approved.
them separately.
Pardon?
We need to do them separately.
Oh, sorry, okay. We'll do January the 1st, January meeting first. Need a motion and a second.
I make a motion that we accept and file the meeting of January, whichever one it was,
We have a second?
January 21st.
Need a second.
Okay, roll call, please.
You gonna, Mr. McKay?
January, I wasn't at that meeting.
January 21st.
Oh, I was at that meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall,
Yes.
Ms. Costco,
Yes.
and Mr. Prolfifer.
Yes. Minutes for the February 5th, 2020 meeting. Need a motion and a second.
I make a motion that we accept and file the minutes of February 5th meeting.
I'll second it. Any questions on the motion?
What they give up there, like?
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Prolfifer,
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall,
Yes.
Ms. Costco.
Yes.
Okay, we have two resolutions. One is for the Deborah Martin, granting a variance for a second two-car garage. You have the resolution in front of you. It's the one, as I recall, this is the one, the property are a little down below grade, and they have a two-car garage already, and they're going to put a two-car in. They
Yes.
could have had a three-car garage without asking for our
Correct.
approval, so it's just really one car. But it's going to be a two-car garage. So I need a motion and a second on that resolution. Mr. McKay? Pardon?
McKay and Mrs. Tyndall,
Yes.
second it. Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall, Mayor McLaughlin,
Yes.
Ms. Costco,
Yes.
Mr. Prolfifer.
Yes. Second resolution is for the Quaker Group for granting the extension of time. We need a motion and a second on that.
So moved.
Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Ms. Costco,
Yes.
and Mr. Prolfifer.
Yes. Okay, under correspondence, before we move to accept it and so forth and so on, there's an extra one that's added. We have 25 correspondences, a 26th, which was handed out just before the meeting, and for the few members of the public that are remaining, the one that we're adding is the temporary process for permitting outside dining. As you all know, the state shut down all the restaurants, started allowing them to do takeout, but now they're starting to allow them to set up outdoor dining. And we have, Mrs. Costco, 9 restaurants in our town, is that what you said today?
That we're eligible to do
Yeah,
this.
9 were eligible, 3 came forward and requested the option, and this all reduces it to writing and puts it in the form of correspondence from the Township Committee to us. So, before I ask for some action on this, I have a question of somebody. Can you all look at item U, public notice? The question that I wrote on my notes after looking at this is, what is this? And that, does anybody in the room know what this is? Or can,
I didn't see it, you.
it's a BTC, the Third Acquisitions, Inc. Is there an application? There's nothing come into the joint land use board. I don't understand what this is in here for.
It says, and I don't have my full packet, it says it's an application for an LOI.
Yes.
That's a letter of determination, which is basically a verification of a wetlands delineation from NJDEP, and they are sent to the municipality.
Okay,
Doesn't necessarily mean that we have an application in hand yet.
okay.
They sometimes do it beforehand.
Pardon me?
Sometimes they do it beforehand.
All right. So this doesn't have, the reason I'm asking this is I got embarrassed after the last meeting that we had. Some resident caught me out front telling me about a COA housing thing that's going in by the railroad tracks down off of Creek Road. And I mean, I know nothing about it, and this seems to be the area that they're talking about.
No, that is not.
It's not, it's, you know, it's,
Block 42 is not in that area.
okay, all right, that's it. Okay, need a motion and a second to accept correspondence and file it.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, any questions on the motion? If not, roll call, please.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall? Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio?
Yes.
Ms. Fosco?
Yes.
Mr. Silk?
Yes.
Mr. Tricoci?
Yes.
And Mr. Colfer?
Yes. Any professional comments?
No, sir.
Okay,
Do you take action on this ordinance?
We added it as correspondence.
pardon me? Yeah, that was, it was added to correspondence. That's-
I have a question about why.
Recommended to adopt the ordinance.
To do what?
I think you got to do more than that.
Well, that's what we were talking about today, so okay.
Well, it's a referral to the board for any recommendations of approval or disapproval, whatever you want to do. You have to report back to council.
Okay.
What exactly are you requiring?
Because there's a change to the zoning, none of our zoning allows for outdoor dining at all. Our laws are silent on it, so therefore it's disallowed. Basically, to cover ourselves and do it properly in Hainesport Township, where some other municipalities already have it in place, so they didn't have to go through this process, we needed to amend our code to allow for outdoor dining due to Executive Order 107, I believe it was, the Governor's Order EO 107 to allow for outdoor dining. So that's what this does. It just formally allows the municipality to amend its zoning for the outdoor dining provision. And 3 of our restaurants have done so, have taken advantage of the outdoor dining allowance.
This says temporary, is there is it?
So what will happen is, it's my understanding that the outdoor dining, as of right now, is going to expire per the executive order November 30th, as well as it also enables those with the retail consumption licensing to serve liquor outside of their existing allowable boundaries. So it expands their existing alcohol permit to allow for outdoor dining, and that also expires in November.
Is there any way we could put in something that would be permanent? I mean, I know the governor's, whatever.
Sure, I mean, that would be a function,
So outdoor dining can be complex when you want to do it in a permanent way, because sometimes it can block a municipal sidewalk. There are a lot of considerations, so I think this is a nice temporary Band-Aid. And if it's something, having outdoor dining is a great thing in the community. A lot of people like to do it, so I think it probably makes sense to give some consideration long-term to allow for that and develop some standards. Maybe it can even be done in conjunction with the redevelopment plan that may come forward sometime.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we, whatever the legal term is, you have to help me, it's late.
You're making a motion that it's not
To-
consistent with the master plan, and you approve it.
Okay.
And I second.
Okay.
Yeah, it's accepting ordinance 2020-5. That's Nicket specific. I was going to say, is there any questions on the motion? And we usually skip over it, but I do have a question. Suppose one of the other restaurants of the remaining 9 wanted to do outside dining. We don't have to take any action. They can do it under this resolution, right?
Correct, they would just come in and submit our application that we
Okay,
created.
so our motion is confirming what's already taken place and allowing any other restaurants to do it, and it's only good till November 30th. Right?
Technically, yes, it's just affirming compliance with our master plan.
Okay, all right. Any other questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mrs. Tyndall?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Can I vote on that? I can?
Yeah.
Since, yeah, okay. Since it was a committee action, I didn't know. Okay, yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Tricoci?
Yes.
Mr. Sill? Okay, I'm ready for bed. Ms. Faggio? Yes. Ms. Costco?
Yes.
And Mr. Colpfeiffer?
Yes. Okay, where are we here? Board comments. Any board comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to public comments.
Yes, I do have.
Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry.
I do.
Can you state your name, ma'am?
Certainly, this is Sandra Sowoff, 48 Bancroft, Newport, New Jersey.
Okay, proceed.
Yes, so,
Ma'am, we can't hear you.
sorry, is it better?
No,
There, there's-
now it is.
This is Sandy Sowoff, and I'm here to let you know that the board, that I received from the U.S. Department of the Interior Fish and Wildlife Service a special report of the presence of federally threatened and New Jersey endangered species.
Pardon?
Ma'am,
Ma'am, hold on 1 second, please. Yes, Mr. Kingsbury?
Cannot be discussed in the absence of the applicant being here and the application being before the board. That will go to whenever they come back.
Okay, ma'am, did you hear that?
I think so. I just wanted to let you know that I provided information to Mrs. Tiber, the board secretary, for your consideration for
Okay,
the letter.
all right, it just has to be done in a more formal environment with the applicant present, okay?
Sure. I've sent it in board, and hopefully we'll take a look at the report from that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other public comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Dave Frank, on behalf of the Mule Schlegel Properties. Again, I want to thank the board very much for the careful consideration that you're giving to the things that are before you, and reaffirm our interest in participating with your proposed subcommittee and the planning board and the governing body in the development of a redevelopment plan for these properties, and generally express my appreciation for what you're trying to do as well. In addition, Ms. Costco, will I be able to get a recording of this if I send you an Oprah tomorrow?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you very much.
It's also on YouTube Live, and I believe you can download it from that as well.
Really? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Frank. I'll close public comment and have a motion for adjournment.
So moved, or make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. We're done.
Scott, I would just put out there that we don't need to have a full-blown site plan. It's just some sort of a...
No, still not?
Nope. Unreal. Could you do me a favor, hand those to Paula Tiver? Yeah.
Congratulations again.
It's called...
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't trip on the way.
Yeah. You said you wanted to be on the subcommittee and then you voted no. Did you think you were voting yes? Did you think you were voting no?
No.
For the proposal? I just want to put it out to Howard. You want to be on the subcommittee?
Yes, I want to be on the subcommittee. I
Did you
don't,
think you were voting for it or against it?
I was voting against tabling it. It should have been done tonight. I mean,
Well, then why
it's
would you want to
effectively a
be on the
formality.
subcommittee?
No, I mean, it's,
I don't get it.
no, because the motion was to table it.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, it shouldn't have been tabled. It should have been accepted tonight.
All right, well, it's up to Howard to consider it.
You pointed that. I've been on the other end of this.
Yeah, no, it's, hey,
Like McKay said, it's called talk to me.
It's called talk. That's
That's it.
30 days is nothing.
And you know that.